Today in Locked On Red Wings, how much longer until Moritz Seider is signed? Yzerman spoke with the media on that and so much more.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I am the color commentator for Oakland University, ACHA D1 Hockey, while Scotty is the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. And also want to thank you guys for making Locked On Red Wings your first listen every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Scotty, as is tradition in major sports, when a huge contract is signed, both the general manager and the player who signed the contract speak with the media. And that is what happened on Tuesday. Both Lucas Raymond and Steve Yzerman spoke with the Detroit media, and let's be honest, as far as Raymond's concerned, as far as most players concerned in this type of stuff, there's not much to be had that's said, and we'll talk about the two quotes I feel like we could pull from the conversation. But the Yzerman stuff, I thought actually for once there were some really interesting answers, and that is in part because there were some really good questions asked of Yzerman. And, you know, he did his classic, let's dance around this as much as I can, giving you an answer without giving you an answer. But I feel like there's conversations to be had about some of the things he said. How much of a conversation? Well, we'll see. But I feel like the Seider stuff we can pair with a report that came not too long after. And I feel like that's probably where we should start, right? Because that's where everyone's attention turns, right, Scotty? Hi, by the way.
Hey, what's up, man?
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm nervous
back.
for some baseball here. That's really consumed my life at the present moment. But yeah, you know, I agree with you. I actually think that there was a decent amount to take out of the media availability as a whole. I don't think it was, I mean, yeah, you know, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We didn't just discover some like crazy thing, but it was interesting just in the terms of I thought there was some decent questions asked Raymond's way, and everybody wants to know, you know, like his feelings toward everything after the contract. But I do think that, to your point, a lot of people are just going to look at the now Seider situation. That's where everyone's attention shifts to, and that was a lot of what Yzerman was asked of.
Right. And the main answer that we were given in regards to the Seider situation from Steve Yzerman was that they're not too far apart in his estimation, which is a good thing to hear because we are chomping at the bit to get this done. We were mentioning yesterday that now Yzerman doesn't have to fight a war on two fronts. He can solely focus on getting Moritz Seider signed. And so a lot of Red Wings fans, and ourselves included, especially us who record, you know, a few hours before these posts every evening, are hoping it comes soon, but not too soon where we have to throw the entire episode out yet again, Stevie. Chris Johnson of Insider Trading had a report that came out not too long after Yzerman made those comments, and he mentions that while the Red Wings were initially looking at an 8-year deal, it is possible that they're looking at a 6 or 7-year deal now in order to get that number to the mid-8s below Larkin's line. And just give me, Scotty, your opinion on that as a contract idea, right? Like 6-7 years to get it to 8.5. As I infer it, that's what it sounds like he is saying, that they're shaving years off to get it to the mid-8s below Larkin's number.
Yeah, you know, look, if we get a news alert tomorrow that Seider is signed for $7 million, am I going to be absolutely heartbroken and think that it's like a huge failure because they shaved 1 year off? No, right? Like I don't think that, you know, the difference between 7 and 8 is that much of a failure in the front office's part if they get the AAV to the number that they're comfortable with. That's all fine and dandy. I will say, if then I mean, I even saw somebody throw out like 5 years in one of the reports. Like if it's that, then I think we're having a much different conversation, right? Like that's, and again, those are both extremes. We're talking about the most years you can give. We're talking about 8 like Raymond, or we're talking about, it sounds like at least the low end of that is probably like 5 or 6. I think for me, unless you literally don't have the money to do it, unless, Mo's just like, I'm not signing for less than 9, figure it out. Then, unless it's that hard of a line in the sand, then I would give him the rest of the cap over 8 and really not feel too bad about it. Like, I don't want to make it sound like you're just like throwing money around willy nilly and like not caring about it or whatever, but 8.74 over 8, I have zero issue with Mo. So I think the only quote unquote problem that would arise from this is if Mo is going, well, you just paid Ray and now you don't have enough money for me. So you're going to have to knock some years off. Unless that's what's happening, I would empty the clip on Mo. I would literally like down to the penny, give him the rest of the cap and just call it a day. Cap's going to come off the books next summer.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I'm with you. If it's 7 years, it's whatever. It's whatever if it's 7 years. Because the reality, too, is like Moritz Seider is a top number 1 D-man that plays the right side. There's not a whole heck of a lot of those going around the NHL. Like, I was talking to one of my friends about it, and she was pointing out that exact thing. Like, at first blush, I was like, if they pay him 8.5 and give him 6 years, and that's just like, nowhere in that report from Chris Johnson, they say that's what they're looking at. They said they're looking at a couple different things to bring the number down. But if that were the reality, I would be disappointed. And, she mentioned that there's not a lot of defensemen under the age of 30 who scored as many points as he did. The list is only 9 other defensemen above him. It goes Adam Fox, Charlie McAvoy, Cale Makar, Mackenzie Weegar, Philip Aronik, Noah Dobson, Evan Bouchard, Sean Durzi, Brock Faber, and Moritz Seider. And of the people on that list, Moritz Seider is the second youngest next to Brock Faber. So, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Moritz Seider is asking for above Dylan Larkin's number. And while I thought he'd signed for 8.3 to 8.5, his camp might be asking for more than that, right? That's how these negotiations go. And if Yzerman's having a hard time bringing him down off that number, then this might be the route that they've had to go, 6 or 7. I would be a little bit disappointed if it's 6. I would be, if I'm being completely honest, because
I would too.
Would take him to, you're losing 2 years of his prime, and he'd be a UFA at the end of that. And that would stink for me. So as long as the reason why you're not keeping him, as long as the reason for not giving him 8 years at over Larkin's number is because you want to keep that arbitrary number that is Larkin's number as the ceiling. Like if you're trying to reduce years to keep him below Larkin's number just for the sake of keeping him below Larkin's number, I think that is short-sighted and kind of silly because the best player on your hockey team should always have the most amount of be paid the highest, and that is what sets that internal cap. And if Seider is the best player in your team, then that's who should be paid the most. Like that's just how it should go.
It's also unsustainable. Like that's an unsustainable methodology. Like, do are we seeing like how the salary cap goes up like a cajillion dollars every year? Like that's ridiculous, right? Like when Crosby signed his deal back in the day, right? It was, oh my goodness, hockey players are getting paid so much money now. And then by the end of it, he was, the 7th highest paid player in the league. Like that's and that was with not as much growth as we have seen in the cap over the last 4 years. Even it's gone up insurmountably. So like I think that is ridiculous and I understand that Larkin just signed a year ago. Like I'm not saying that inflation has like changed it that much in this case, but I am just saying that's an unsustainable mindset anyways. Right. So how long are we going to hold on to that like ridiculous, like, it's got to be less than Larkin? I don't know. again, I would spend every single last penny on Seider. Who are you adding to the cap in September, dog? Like, just empty the clip, give them the rest of the money you have on the books in 2024. And then, you again, as we talk about all the time, you have a rolling cap. You'll get some money off the books next year, and you can use that.
Yeah, and like the thing too is, and I know it sounds like a heel turn based on some of the comments I made yesterday regarding that Larkin internal cap structure, right? Because my belief is it's not that nobody should ever make more than Larkin. It's that as long as Larkin is the best player on the team, he should make the most.
Right.
And I agree with that sentiment. Right.
Yesterday, I was like, oh yeah, everybody wants to get paid. If Steve wants to make everyone pay less than Larkin, sure. Like, yeah, in principle, that's fine. But now that I'm quote unquote learning, we don't know how accurate any of these reports are, but if there's a legitimate fork in the road with negotiations because of this arbitrary cap that isn't even real, that the Wings front office has put on themselves, then yeah, that is stupid. That's ridiculous. So we'll see how it plays out. It could all be nothing, but
if Seider is the best player in your team, then he is now the new cap. That's how it works. You pay the best player in your team the most, and he's the one who makes the most. I felt like there was one other. Oh, and then for contract comparables, I know we're over, but I want to finish the Seider conversation here in segment one. Like Brock Faber, I brought it up. He's like the perfect comparable, which is why I thought 8 by 8.5 made a lot of sense, which is why I was like with you, where I was kind of shocked when I heard that on this Chris Johnson report that they're thinking of going shorter to bring that number back down to Brock Faber's value around to where that is, because Brock Faber he signed his extension after having only played 2 years in the NHL, and his first season he put up 47 points in 82 games played. He got the toughest deployments on the Wild, just like how Moritz Seider had the toughest deployments on the Red Wings. Granted, when you compare those two deployments, Moritz Seider's was still tougher. So like it makes a lot of sense that those contracts would be comparable. The only difference between those two contracts would just be service time. Moritz Seider's played 3 years. Brock Faber really only played 1 year with those results. So you could argue that because Moritz Seider's been doing that for longer, he deserves to get paid. And I would not argue that. But like Brock Faber right now for me is like the comparable. That's why I thought 8 by 8.5 seemed like such a slam dunk. And it's why I'm so surprised that this is, by this Chris Johnson report, that they're considering 6 and 7 to bring it down. And again, if it's 7, whoop-de-doo. I don't really care that much. It's 1 year. But once you start shaving multiple years off of his prime, then I'm starting to be like, all right, maybe like do what I was saying like a couple of weeks ago. Then bridge him until next year, the year after that, when you have more money and you can pay him what he actually deserves, so you can lock him up for those 8 years. Like that's just, I'm just word soup right now. All my thoughts are streaming out of my consciousness.
Yeah, it's all a full circle. Like we just talked about the cap going up, like it's going to continue going up. You sign him to 8 years now so that the value is better by the end. Like that's again, the only reason why I would like maybe hear it out is if, I mean, to your point, like if Mo was like, I'm not taking less than, 8.75 and you don't have 8.75. So, figure it out. That would be the only way that I would see this being a legitimate thing. If he wants the amount of money you have available, give him 8. That's where I stand.
Right. I agree with you. We're gonna take a quick break. What?
That's where I stand. Great. That's what you sounded like. It was funny.
I didn't mean to make it sound dismissive. We're gonna take a quick break. When we return, we'll continue on. Get back to the Yzerman comments and the Raymond comments. So stay tuned. Segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings coming up. Great. Got to talk to you guys today about Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you an incredible deal on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation, not caution. Don't know how to read. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, and so much more with those game time picks. And you can toggle on all-in pricing so that it shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Again, you got to toggle that all-in pricing feature on. It'll show you everything up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Get a panoramic view before you buy with those seat views, and Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference with the lowest price guarantee. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, I think the next comment that Steve Yzerman made that stuck out to me is they asked about the roster construction. A couple of people did. One asked about the 3 goalies. I think it was Sean Shapiro who asked about just like in general the flexibility of the forward core because there's 8D, will be 8D shortly at least when Seider is signed, and 3 goalies. And he's like, basically, because he doesn't ever give you a definitive answer, they're going to figure it out, let it play out, may roll 3 goalies again, and it depends on Husso. Said all 3 are healthy right now, but Husso hasn't seen a game in basically a year and a half, so they're going to have to see how it plays out. When you hear that, do you think this is real, or are you like me, Scotty, where you think he's just lying through his teeth because he can't tell you his plan?
Yeah, I would lean the latter there. I would lean towards Steve Yzerman's a liar sometimes being probably the most likely outcome there. I just, we've talked about it so much. We don't have to go down the entire rabbit hole again like we have so often this summer, but like I really am having a hard time believing that the plan is to go into the season with 12-8-3. Like that is just so weird if that is the plan that I'm going to have to see it to believe it. Like until it is opening night, game 1 of the regular season, and the lineup has 12-8-3 on it, I'm going to have reservations about how true that actually is. So when he says, he didn't say, oh, yeah, like we're totally fine with the way the roster is constructed, right? He was like, right. Oh, like we'll see how it plays out. And that leads me to believe that he's probably of a similar mindset where I'm sure the front office is working on different strategies and different paths to getting the roster to be a little more traditional.
I mean, I think he's telling the truth when he says like, oh, we'll see how it goes. Like, cause he is literally going to see how it goes. But I don't believe him when he's like, we may roll 3 goalies again this year. And you might maybe start the season with 3 goalies, but 11-7, like running 12 forwards and occasionally running 11-7 is just not sustainable. Like it just simply put is not a sustainable way to continue to run a hockey team. You need more flexibility in your forward core. And yes, injuries happen. Eventually somebody's going to get down and you're going to have more roster flexibility. But you want that up front. Like you don't want to be at this weird number to start the season. So, like, I think he's going to use, I do think, this is where I think he's telling the truth. I think he's going to use training camp and preseason to figure out what the best move is. And then I do think he will make a move, either to get rid of a goalie or to get rid of a defenseman. When I mean get rid of, I don't mean like, ship him off to Russia, but like send him down to the Grand Rapids if need be, put him on waivers. Like, I think that he is going to figure out a way to give this team some flexibility, because at the end of the day, he wants this team to be the best possible team they can be. And he even mentioned this too, like if Nate Danielson or Marco Kasper or Carter Mazur, who he sung the praises of, especially Carter Mazur, right, who talked about how like he made it his offseason goal to get stronger, and he's been doing that, and that both he and Kasper, and he said like all of the Grand Rapids guys, but he was asked specifically about Mazur and Kasper, had a great year last year, including in the postseason, earn a spot. Like then he like if they force his hand, they force his hand. But then again, we heard that last year, and turned out Simon Edvinsson was pretty well blocked for most of the year. So it's just it's when they ask him these questions and he answers the way he does, where he's like, oh yeah, we might have to do that. I don't believe him. And I don't mean that in a negative connotation. Like, I want my general manager to not tell people what he's planning. We were talking about this yesterday. I was like, for a Roofer Radio perspective, it stinks because it doesn't give us a whole heck of a lot to deliberate. But as a hockey fan, this is exactly what I want out of a general manager. I want him to not tell the media anything, even if we kind of are part of the media in the end, right? Because this is how good teams get built. So while I'm anxious and have a little bit of angst about the idea of maybe possibly having 8D and 3 goalies, but only having 12 forwards, I have enough faith to think that this will sort itself out by the time game number 1 is played. And if it doesn't, I'll criticize that because I think it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree.
All right. So that was a quick segment. We'll head to segment 3 because we went over in segment 1. When we return, we will finish up any Yzerman comments we have, and then there's a couple comments from Lucas Raymond that were made as well. So stay tuned. Segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about FanDuel. You heard us talk about FanDuel. They are America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have a little something different for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. All right, Scotty, what else from the Yzerman press conference stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, I don't have too much more from Yzerman specifically. I think really there's a couple comments from Raymond that stood out somewhat. I mean, a lot of it was just excitement. Obviously, the dude just got $8 million a year for the next 8 years. That's going to be a pretty exciting time for him. Excuse me, but made it pretty clear that he was only ever really wanting to be a Red Wing, which, you know, what is he going to say now? He's going to sign an 8-year deal and be like, yeah, I didn't really want to be here. So, like, again, some of it is just expected and just kind of, you know, hockey and media speak and whatnot. But it's nice to hear that he seems excited about it, that he believes in the plan going forward and whatnot. And then I think that, honestly, the biggest thing that everybody took out of it was just when people started asking him about him and Seider working out together and practicing together.
Yeah, it's just really nice to hear Raymond go like, yeah, it wasn't anything like contract related because we're both RFAs that we were working out together. It was more so to get our mind off of the contract talks, like just to hang out with a friend. He's like, basically, right. We came up together. We've been really close friends the entire time, which is really, it's nothing more than just simply nice to hear that two of the youngest core pieces of your team are incredibly close, right? And if all things go well, we can keep these two players together, unlike what happened with Larkin and Mantha, Larkin and Bertuzzi, Larkin and Athanasiou. Like, with this team headed in the right direction, maybe we can actually
fill in the blank.
Right. Like, right. With where this team is at, like now there's like a career-long, lifelong bond that hopefully we can keep together for, if Seider signs an 8-year deal, at least 8 more years. So it's nice to see and nice to hear that these guys are so close-knit, because that kind of stuff translates into the locker room and helps foster better relationships with everyone else as well. And like you said, he talked about how much he loves the city, loves the team, loves the direction of the team, and also said that some of the games he played at the end of the season were of the most exciting games he's ever played in his entire career, which is really, I mean, is he wrong? Like, some of the most exciting Red Wings games I've ever seen.
I would love to find a game that he has played in his entire life that would, qualify as more than that. Yeah,
that matched the intensity and had the gravity that those had. I did want to mention the Berggren comments too that Yzerman made. He was asked about Jonathan Berggren, and he talked about how there was like a 1 or 2 year deal that was on the table. And Yzerman basically was like, because we didn't know where the RFAs, the other guys were at, we settled on a 1-year deal. Because again, typically when you pay somebody less or give somebody less term, it brings down the number you're paying them. And so that's kind of what he was alluding to there with those comments was that they couldn't give him a 2-year deal because he didn't know how much he was going to have to pay Seider and Raymond, which is something like we kind of talked about yesterday. Berggren was simply a victim of circumstance with those two guys still unsigned.
Still an RFA next year, no? So
yes, he is.
Yeah, if he plays well and earns another contract, then when money comes off the books, there won't be a big, giant, looming 2 $8+ million deals that the Wings have to sign next year. And then, when a couple other contracts get off the books, then he can use that money and get a nice little extension for himself or like elsewhere. Again, we'll see what happens. But for this summer, definitely just unfortunate that it lined up exactly with the, 2 franchise cornerstones that the Wings kind of have to pay.
Yeah, and that's kind of what he said, right? He's like, this sets up, Jonathan to have a really nice year and get paid more next year. He also, as far as that goes, they asked him like, what would be a good year for Jonathan Berggren, and he was like, to be an all-around good hockey player, offensively and defensively, which is kind of, again, what we were talking about yesterday. It's like,
sounds familiar, yeah.
Don't be a black hole. Be a positive attribute on both ends of the ice. So that's really all I got. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that he may have mentioned. We hit the big notes, right? Seider. He did say that the Traverse City Prospects Tournament has mostly run its course, and that a lot of it has to do with just teams not wanting to play that many games with prospects because they were afraid that they were going to get injured. I inferred that part. He said teams didn't want to have to play that many games. I inferred the because of injury part because we've seen a lot of those. Also, the travel expenses as well, that he's been in discussions with Jim Nill because, again, Jim Nill came from the Detroit organization about maybe going to Dallas for a few games. So I don't think we've seen the end of the prospect games, but it may be the end of the Traverse City prospect games, which would suck because it's a staple of Detroit Red Wings preseason. Traveling to Traverse City, getting to meet a lot of the young prospects, and Traverse City in general, just beautiful. God, it's
end of the summer in T-City. That's not very many places in the planet better than that. So
beautiful up there. So it would be a shame if it came to that. And hopefully training camp is still up there, so you still get a little bit of that. But the prospect games are obviously the prize of that weekend. With that being said, Scotty, I think that about covers it. Is there anything else that we've left unattended to?
I think you wanted to bring up something about Casper and Mazer.
I did, kind of, last segment.
Okay. As long as you talked about everything you wanted to talk about with them, then I think that's it. I don't have anything else.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, we'll see you guys tomorrow. We have a cool guest coming on. Great. Awesome.
Great, dude. That's great.
Great. That's sick. Cool story, bro.
Cool. Thanks for showing up.
Same time. Wait. We ball. Same time. Same place. It's your team. Every day.
Every day.